translate their message and together make a toast to the new schemes they're hatching, to the next regime they'll change, to the next nation they'll turn into a bombing range. They hyped it on the radio, newspapers and TV, the anarchists who'd come and destroy the city. The anarchists who'd come and the undercover cops, the old Chicago Red Squad and their psyops. It's the cops who bought the petrol, the cops who bought the cans, the cops who brought it home, the cops who made the plan, so they got the terrorists they wanted. Now they're doing fine, they got the terrorists and they got the headlines. I wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Meanwhile in Afghanistan, another family is dead, wiped out in their sleep as they were lying in their bed, wiped out of existence like so many are each day. This is liberation, so they say. This is liberation, and in case you are unsure, the NSA will tell you if your thoughts might be impure, while the generals fly their Air Force all the way across the ocean. They'll build military bases, drop bombs of all description, but if you drive from Florida to the city of Chicago to pay a little visit to Mayor Rombo, watch out for the cops who bring home the gasoline and your apartment becomes a crime scene. I wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Meanwhile in Afghanistan, a village has been hit, a wedding party transformed into a pit, transformed into a graveyard for children, women, men, transformed into a graveyard for empire again, a place where terrorists are born with every drone attack, a graveyard for the Midwest boys never coming back, a graveyard for society, a graveyard for ideals, a place to bury all the hearts of anyone who feels. And at the meeting in Chicago, they'll talk of women's rights, they'll talk about the terrorists they've got within their sights, the terrorists abroad, the terrorists so near, the terrorists who grew up in a suburb around here. I wanna know who, wanna know who is a terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Meanwhile in Afghanistan, more protesters shot down by NATO troops who had to prove it's them who run this town, by NATO troops who have to show they are in control, while it all comes crashing down in the countries they stole. NATO troops committing war crimes every day, ruling over nations in the old imperial way. The lying generals in Chicago with their satellites and tanks, taking orders from their bosses, the oil men and banks taking orders from their bosses, looking suitably enraged at terror, foreign and domestic, real or staged, whether led on by informants or just pissed off by the war. The terrorists are meeting behind closed doors. I wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? That's the title track of my CD, Meanwhile in Afghanistan, which you can download in its entirety for free or by donation at davidrovics.com. Start right away with the commercial announcements, huh? Well, what the heck. This is David Rovics, and this is April in History and Song, my monthly, semi-monthly podcast, broadcast kind of thing that I'm doing at the beginning, first Sunday of every month, and then at random times in between. And there's a chat room. I think there's a chat, somebody in there. There's a chat room anybody can join in on. There's Jack from Hong Kong, or he may be in India, we don't know. He may be anywhere. He travels a lot. Good to see you out there. And and I thought I'd start off with that song, do a little bit of sort of, current events before moving on to history. And the current events, of course, are fairly constant in Afghanistan, but most recently we've had, in the past week we've had civilians killed by NATO, we've had suicide bombings, we've had a diplomat killed, all sorts of ongoing excitement, I suppose, and death and destruction and imperial chaos, and more. And I just learned that Tom Morello is just back from touring with Bruce Springsteen in Australia and playing lead guitar for him. And I just heard about that a few days ago in Rolling Stone and all sorts of interesting places, and by text message. And I thought I'd play this shining example of Tom Morello's guitar playing, which he graced me with on this track from Meanwhile in Afghanistan, London is Burning.
Another man, they have that kind of knack, and it may not be coincidental that he was black. He was sitting in his car, they say he might have had a gun. What we know for sure is he had 5 kids, daughters and sons. Now he can't have a family, he'll never see his friends. His neighbors understand what kind of message this sends. Some life is worth less, some life is worth more. You don't have to be a mathematician to know the score. Some people get shot just for being who they are. Some people play with iPads, take vacations, drive in fancy cars. Some people go to universities, some people do not. It depends on where you were born and how much money you got. The government cuts their spending, widening the divide, then reacts with disbelief when they face the rising tide of anger at the cuts of the futures that they rob. With each day so many have to live without a job. Now the flames are getting hotter, maybe coming to your town. London is burning down. Cameron went on TV in his suit and tie. If the riots asked the question, then this was his reply. We'll arrest these hooligans, these people without shame. They are only criminals, and it's only criminals to blame. Morals have decayed among the peasants' ranks, so let us lock them up while we bail out the banks. When that's the way they look at it, it's not very hard to watch things fall apart in this house of cards. Now the flames are getting hotter, maybe coming to your town. London is burning down. People whine. These kids have too much freedom, and all this is just a sign that we need more policemen to teach them some respect. Well, if that's your line, then I know just what you can expect. The class will be repeated until the lesson has been learned. All you need is some injustice to make your cities burn. All you need is the perception, whether or not it's true, that most of us will never live the way you do. Now the flames are getting hotter, maybe coming to your town. London is burning down.
London is Burning with Tom Morello on lead guitar, and there's some kick-ass lead guitar work on the rest of the album too. Nick Angelo from here in Portland, and also that keyboard playing that you were hearing on Meanwhile in Afghanistan and others. songs on the album is Asher Fulero from around here, and some of those harmony vocals with Christy Lane and Sarah King, and the very capable Spank Hopkins on drums, Mark West on the bass. I remember all their names. We spent quite a bit of time together at Big Red Studio out in Corbett, Oregon. Beautiful, beautiful place in a beautiful part of the world, in the woods by a river. Idyllic environment to shout about the ills of the world. So just doing some current events stuff here. That was current only because Tom Morello is alive and just came back from Australia, and I thought, why not play that track with him on it? I don't know how that's a current event. It's not really a current event. It's just in my mind, it's a current event. In somebody's life, it's current. But I want to play something for all the good people in the occupied territories in Palestine who are currently suffering yet more Israeli bombardment and the ongoing Israeli blockade, and now there's problems with the UN pulling out Gaza, and my good friend Syed Banura and Jenka and their baby are all visiting there now, so hello to all of them, in case they might be listening now or later, or never. Let's see. So, I thought I'd do another song from the album Meanwhile in Afghanistan. And speaking of Meanwhile in Afghanistan, my Meanwhile in Afghanistan Europe leg of the Meanwhile in Afghanistan World Tour begins next Monday. I fly from Portland to Copenhagen, and then I head up to Norway, where my first gig is, and Trondheim, and then Oslo, and then various gigs in Germany, Denmark, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Britain, and Ireland. It's ending with the G8 protests in Ireland, and then a festival in Scotland. Then I come home in June. And if anybody's interested in coming to a gig, or if you know European, all that, any of that self-promotional stuff, insert here. Just go to davidrovics.com, and it's all there, and you can download the CD for free. And if you want to subscribe, then that would be amazing. I'm trying to crowdsource my life, and if you click on the subscribe link there at davidrovics.com, you can read about that if you want to, and become a subscriber and have my gratitude forever, and receive lots of free CDs in the mail, and a cool laminated card that gives you free entry to any of my shows anywhere in the world. Okay, now I think I'll stop with the commercial announcements now that I got all that out of the way. People have told me before that I don't tell them these things enough, and that I should, who knows? Who are these people making such recommendations? I don't know. But anyway, I did it. And here is Israeli Geography 101.
Netanyahu's in a tizzy. His eyes are filled with hate. He said the problem with those Arabs is they won't recognize a Jewish state. He said those Palestinians just won't come around to accepting Jewish rule on their holy ground. He said the Arabs don't accept their new neighbors in the hood. Those ungrateful regimes don't respect us as they should. Well, I don't want to upset anyone or unduly take to task, but if a state wants recognition, it seems reasonable to ask, where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? I heard him speaking to the Congress, getting his 29th standing O. He said, we need our security from those terrorists, don't you know? Well, if you want security, I wonder if you'd say it's true that the Palestinians should have security too. Cause if you want security, it seems only fair that you should also grant it to the people over there. And maybe you could answer, though the question is a sin, just where your country ends and your neighbor's lands begin. Where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? democracy in the Middle East. Or actually, he said the only viable one, at least. The PA isn't viable, because they didn't vote Abbas. They voted for those terrorists that they call Hamas. So we can't recognize them, though we wish they would agree that we stole their land quite fairly here by the Mediterranean Sea. We stole it fair and square. We stole it just like you. If you don't like it, you're an anti-Semite, whether you're a Muslim or a Jew. Okay, right. But tell me, where are your borders? 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 Where are your borders?
So, Jack and Daniel and I are having a little discussion in the chat room, and which actually you can sign into without having a Facebook account, by the way. Those of you out there who don't have a Facebook account, you don't need to sign in that way. You can just create an account with Spreaker, and they don't ask for much information. You just have to make up a name and a password, I think basically is it. And so you can bypass Facebook, which, you know, I mean, I use Facebook a lot, but it increasingly seems like a good idea not to. And I saw a wonderful listening post, edition of the listening post on Al Jazeera English yesterday that was focusing on a Canadian guy, I can't remember his name, but a brilliant guy who talked about the effects that the new media would have on society, the new media at that time being television. And everything he says is so prescient and so compelling and so right on. And anyway, in the chat room we were just talking about Daniel mentioned that he first heard my music on Democracy Now! And I love it that happens, and probably a very large percentage of my people who like my music or found my music found it that way. And I think that that's great, and I wish that Democracy Now! Would play more independent music, not just me. And they play me a few times a year or less, and they should be playing a lot more independent music. And I wrote on my blog, songwritersnotebook.blogspot.com, there's a few blog entries down, you'll find an open letter to Democracy Now! Where I explain the fact that most of the music in the music breaks that they play are bands that have sold millions, and that's not appropriate for an independent radio show to be promoting so much music that sold. I mean, a lot of it's really good and they should be playing it, but just not in such, most of the music they play should be independent music, just like most of the people they interview are not. They're not mostly interviewing corporate CEOs. They're interviewing, all sorts of activists and authors and great folks. So why do they play so much Johnny Cash in their music breaks? I love Johnny Cash, but he got enough publicity. Anyway, I think, being positive is better. So I just try not to complain too much, and I fail. So, oh well. But I try to be more positive and just say like, when I hear an episode of Democracy Now! Lately, I'm just like tweeting out something that's just like, oh, great interview with so-and-so this morning. Here's a song I wrote about that subject, which, and I don't say, parentheses, which they didn't play, because that's kind of like obvious and sounds like sour grapes, like a prima donna's sour grapes or something. Anyway, crazy stuff going on in Korea right now. I mean, mainly not so much in Korea, but to Korea, with the U.S. flying nuclear-equipped stealth bombers over the border that could wipe out the entire country of the DPRK in minutes, and then they wonder why folks are a little worked up over there. And I loved the interview on Democracy Now!, speaking of Democracy Now!, with Christine Hung, I think her name is, the other day, where she was talking about what if Russia and Mexico were doing joint military drills right off the Pacific. Would the U.S. say that was just kind of like normal countries looking out for their security? Well, I think everybody listening and everybody not listening knows the answer to that. Here's a song I wrote about the ongoing situation there.
50 years ago today, we stood in rubble. The sun rose each morning through the smoke. Your planes flew above us looking for something left to bomb. Our factories, our schools lied ravaged and broke. Now you wonder why there is this anger, as we remember all too clearly a time that we once knew, when every home, every dam, and so many, many people were flattened to the ground by the things you had to do, when Korea was just another name for bombs falling from the sky, and home was just another word for this place where people die. "50 years ago today, you killed my mother. I've lived my whole life and never knew the love she might have given, the joy she might have felt, to sit in the garden where her grandchildren grew. And now you wonder why we might feel attacked. You wonder at the stand our leaders take. But it was you, I remember, who gave us this lesson of the sound of a city when it breaks, when Korea was just another name for bombs falling from the sky, and home was just another word for this place where people die. 50 years ago today, you killed my father. He was shooting at your planes when he died. Just one of how many million dead soldiers fighting and falling side by side. Now you wonder at what you call an evil axis. You throw words that someday will explode. We remember the last time you said these things, when crater was another word for road, when Korea was just another name for bombs falling from the sky, and home was just another word for this place where people die. Years ago today, we stood in rubble.
And there's just a new BBC documentary out that sounds fantastic about the war crimes committed by the U.S. in North Korea during the war, during which lots of military brass were ordering their soldiers to fire indiscriminately at fleeing refugees. So in New York City, there's a fast food workers are on strike, and that is so wonderful, and I wish them so well, and I wrote a song about them a long time ago, and this is it.
When I awoke one morning, there was a feeling in the air. Everything was quiet, things were different everywhere. The Wobblies were back again with Joe Hill at the mic, when all the minimum wage workers went on strike. There was no one flipping burgers, all the grills were cold. Onion rings were in their bags. Fries were growing mold. There were no baristas at Starbucks asking how many shots would you like, when all the minimum wage workers went on strike. There was no one pumping gasoline, no one driving from town to town, no one at the register, all the highways were shut down. Cars were stuck in the garage, CEOs on bikes, when all the minimum wage workers went on strike. The fruit was falling off the trees, no one to load the trucks. Corn was rotting on the stalk, no farm hands to shuck. Workfare workers were hanging at home, spending the day with their tykes, when all the minimum wage workers went on strike. Yuppie parents were housebound, their nannies left the job. Walmart workers said enough of our labor has been robbed. The Foot Locker was locked up, the boss had to take a hike, when all the minimum wage workers went on strike. When I awoke one morning, there was a feeling in the air. Everything was quiet, things were different everywhere. The Wobblies were back again with T-Bone at the mic, when all the minimum wage workers went on strike. When all the minimum wage workers went on strike.
That's Eric Royer on banjo, doing that fantastic banjo playing. Eric Royer on banjo and Sean Staples on mandolin. Wonderful, wonderful folks, wonderful musicians that I miss, but used to see much more when we all played in the Boston subways together. And so let's see. Now we got Lindsay on board in the chat room, and so folks listening, at least that I know of, in Arizona, Ohio, and India, and I can't tell who else is out there. There must be a way to tell who's listening, but I don't know how to do that. But I can see who's in the chat room. So. Anyway, let's see. So they're fracking, or they're thinking about fracking in China, and they're already fracking all over the place. And the pipeline, they're fracking in Canada and sending that stuff in a pipeline and going through the U.S. and leaking all over the place. And Arkansas just had thousands of gallons of toxic oil spilled all over a neighborhood, and now they want to expand the pipeline, and I have a song about that, but it's not mixed yet. It'll be on my next album. It was a commissioned song. In fact, I just wrote an essay about that concept on my blog, of prostitutes and songwriters, I believe I called it. And here's a song that, if there's anybody in China listening, which I think there might be, at least in Hong Kong, but maybe not mainland, I don't know. But anyway, fracking is a bad idea, just in case you don't know that. And it should be opposed by any means necessary.
There was a knock one morning. A man was standing at my door. He said, "Hello, I'm from Halliburton. Have you heard of us before? We'd like to lease your backyard to drill for natural gas. It's called hydraulic fracturing, and it is the very pass for a clean energy future above the Marcellus stone. Plus, we'll give you lots of money and a new mobile phone." I said, "You are a corporate crook. I don't believe the things you tell, and you can drive right off my property and then go straight to hell. No fracking way. No fracking way. I don't trust corporate salesmen, whatever they may say. No fracking way. No fracking way. No fracking way." My neighbor was out of work and things were looking grim, so when the fracking guy came knocking, he had better luck with him. The company said, "Don't worry, everything will just be fine, so just sign your name right here, sir, on this dotted line." Pretty soon the water was tasting pretty dire. One day I lit a match and the water caught on fire. I thought about a lawsuit, then stumbled upon the fact that fracking is exempted from the Clean Water Act. No fracking way. No fracking way. Is this how democracy works here in the USA? No fracking way. No fracking way. No fracking way. As if the situation weren't sufficiently unattractive, we tested the water and found it was radioactive. Now my property is worthless and there's a tumor in my brain. Half of my neighbors are sick, the rest are just in pain. Maybe I should take the money, move off to live somewhere, but all the places I look at, they're fracking there. Our choices now are simple: lose that which we hold dear, or communicate the message in a way that's unstoppably clear. No fracking way. No fracking way. Tell these frackers to frack off, both tomorrow and today. No fracking way. No fracking way. No fracking way. No fracking way. No fracking way.
So I'll do one more song from about current events before I move on to historical events, or recent history at least, in some cases not so recent, and dates related to it. So I'll do a song here, which Daniel McGowan, a wonderful man, activist who has been accused and convicted of property destruction in the past, and for environmental causes. He was jailed for 7 years and held in communications management unit, and had his communications very, very restricted, especially after he wrote, I guess, some articles, and then they in the Earth First Journal, and then they put him in another unit where he had even more restricted communication. And so he's out in a so-called halfway house now in New York, and wrote an article for the Huffington Post and a blog about how restrictive his conditions of confinement were in the communications management unit. And it seems they're building a new communications management unit or something in the middle of the prison where Marie Mason is imprisoned in Texas. And both of them are friends of mine, and haven't seen Daniel in a long time. Saw Marie a few months ago in prison. But Daniel's out, but then he was rearrested for writing this blog in the Huffington Post, and then because of perhaps popular pressure, outrage, media attention, or perhaps a higher up in the Bureau of Prisons who realized that arresting him for the blog post was probably bad PR. I don't know, but after, I think, a few hours, they released him again back to the halfway house. And so I thought, how about I'll play this song, which is also illegal technically. I mean, it violates a speech law passed by the Congress in 1997 that says if you describe an incendiary device and encourage people to use such a device for the purposes of the liberation of animals or the environment, then it is no longer protected speech. It is eco-terrorism, and if convicted of it by a jury, which no one has been so far, you would get 25 years mandatory sentence. And Rod Coronado did take that to a jury trial, and it was a hung jury. And so then he took a plea bargain and went to prison for a year for a speech. And he's one of 5 people, I believe, who have been imprisoned for talking in the U.S. Recent years, I'm talking about, for this law.
Rodney Coronado was arrested for a speech that he gave one evening by the San Diego beach. He stated his opinions, they sounded just like mine. Now they want to put him behind bars till 2029. Prosecutor said the problem was the speech showed intent. I couldn't figure out exactly what that meant. You can't describe an action, say you thought that it was swell. So what'll happen when we sing this? Who the heck can tell? But we don't like the condo and we're gonna burn it down. Corporate terrorists drive them out of town. We'll bring a lot of gasoline, pour it on the floor, light a match, say a prayer, and run right out the door. Burn it down. Burn it down. Burn it down. Burn it down. We're going to burn it down. 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 If you just sang that chorus, then you just broke the law. To be an eco-terrorist, now you just gotta flap your jaw. And hey, who knows, by the time you have a chance to blink, whether you're a criminal might depend on what you think. But we don't like the bulldozer, we're gonna burn it down. Corporate terrorists drive them out of town. We'll bring a lot of gasoline, pour it on the floor, light a match, say a prayer, and run right out the door. Burn it down. Burn it down. Burn it down. Burn it down. We're going to burn it down. 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 First they came for Rod, made me next to come for you. Let me tell you what I think all of us should do. Sing the song with me, raise your fist and caterwaul. If we fight together, they can't arrest us all. 'Cause we don't like the Walmart and we're gonna burn it down. Corporate terrorists drive them out of town. We'll bring a lot of gasoline, pour it on the floor, light a match, say a prayer, and run right out the door. Burn it down. Burn it down. Burn it down. Burn it down. We're going to burn it down. 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 Burn it down.
So in the chat room, I've just been informed that anonymous breaking news coming from my chat room. I've been informed that the anonymous has attacked Israel's computers and is trying to shut down the internet in Israel, which seems like a brilliant idea. Actually, shutting down the internet anywhere is a brilliant idea because, unless it's like the dictator doing it so that he can keep anybody from hearing about what's going on. But, otherwise, I think shutting down the internet is a great idea because we're all staring at computer screens way too much, and Anonymous is not only making a great political statement by attacking Israel's internet, but they are probably allowing a lot of Israelis to take a break from the office and go for a stroll along the beach, and that is a very good idea. They should stop staring at those computers too. They do it even more than most people. And then, why the heck would anybody want to attack Israel's computers? It's just hard to imagine. But here's one possible reason. This is moving on to history in song for the month of April. On April 3rd, 2002, the so-called Israeli Defense Forces invaded the city of Jenin, destroying much of it, killing scores of people. I visited their graves and then ran into some weird guy in Vancouver, BC, who was denying the invasion ever happened, and that's a strange thing to deny when it's so obvious. You can visit and see the graves and see the buildings that were destroyed and rebuilt. And here's a song called Jenin.
Child, what will you remember when you recall your 16th year? The horrid sound of helicopter gunships, the rumble of the tanks as they drew near, as the world went about its business, and I burned another tank of gasoline. Dow Jones lost a couple points that day while you were crying in the city of Jenin. Did they even give your parents warning before they blew the windows out with shells, while you hid inside the high school basement amidst the ringing of church bells, as you watched your teacher crumple by the doorway, and in England they were toasting to the Queen? You were so far from the thoughts of so many, huddled in the city of Jenin. Were you thinking of the taunting of the soldiers, or of the shit they smeared upon the walls? Were you thinking of your cousin after torture, or Tel Aviv and its glittering shopping malls? When the fat men in their mansions say that you don't want peace, did you wonder what they mean as you sat amidst the stench inside the darkness in the shattered city of Jenin? What went through your mind on that day at the sight of your mother's vacant eyes, as she lay still among the rubble beneath the blue Middle Eastern skies, as you stood upon this bulldozed building beside the settlements and their hills so green, as your tears gave way to grim determination amidst the ruins of the city of Jenin. And why should anybody wonder, as you stepped on board the crowded bus across the green line, and you reached inside your jacket for the cord? Were you thinking of your neighbors' buried bodies as you made the stage for this scene? as you set off the explosives that were strapped around your waist. Were you thinking of the city of Janine?
So, let's see, I was going to do a different song. Yeah, a song for April 4th. April 4th, Cindy Sheehan, who some of you hopefully remember as the Peace Mom, whose son was killed in Iraq, and she became active with the anti-war movement, and went to the Veterans for Peace conference in the summer of 2005 in August in Texas, which is where I met my wife Reiko, who is listening in the living room, and it's also where I met Cindy Sheehan, and unless I met her before then, and if I did, I'm not sure, but anyway, certainly met her there. And then she and several dozen Veterans for Peace members and others left the conference early, not out of any not because they didn't like the conference, but just because they wanted to go and do something while they were all in town. And so everybody went over to Crawford, Texas, where Bush had his ranch, and they started camping out. And then, of course, it became quite a media phenomenon, and which was a darn good thing. And Cindy is no longer in the media nearly like she used to be, but it has been doing great activism of various kinds since then, including a documentary that she made about Hugo Chavez, and also was it a documentary, or a book? A book. She was working on a documentary. I don't know if that happened, but the book did. And currently, Cindy and a bunch of other folks are on a trip riding their bicycles from California to Washington, D.C. over the course of several months. And it's a great project, and if anybody wants to join them, I'm sure they welcome other participants. I believe they have ridden so far from right now. I think they've gotten to like Fresno. I think they got from like the San Francisco Bay Area to Fresno, I believe, and they're going to continue on east from there. They might be passing through Arizona. Maybe Lindsay will see them in Tucson. I don't know if they're going to be going through Tucson or where, but they're on their way east. And I know there's a website. You can just Google Cindy Sheehan, and I'm pretty sure that the trip, the website for the bike tour will come right up. And here's a song I wrote soon after I met Cindy.
Casey was a good boy. He treated people well. His mama loved him. Anyone could tell. She'd send him off to school, pack his lunch with care, and when he came back home, she hugged him with her fingers in his hair. Cindy, she loved Casey, and when all is said and done, she is every mother, and he was every mother's son. When Casey was a little older, he spent his time each week in that church in Vacaville, in the service of the meek, in the service of his city, in the service of the Lord, with his mama in the pews, all the time they could afford. If their love alone could save us, then the world would be one. She is every mother, and he was every mother's son. People thought the priesthood was where he'd someday be, so some folks were surprised. When he joined the army, the recruiter told him he didn't have to fight. Cindy hoped this was the case and prayed for him every night. That was before they sent him to the desert with a gun. She is every mother, and he was every mother's son. His truck had no armor, And when it came under fire, it and half the soldiers in it became a funeral pyre. Cindy, she was sleeping the moment Casey died, and she knew she'd never see him standing by her side. There was no consolation, no safe place she could run. She's every mother, and he was every mother's son. The president, he told her, he died for a noble cause. Now Cindy's wondering exactly what that was, 'cause they never found the weapons. And now that Casey's gone, it seems that oil is the game, and Casey was the pawn. Cindy's got some questions, yes, and so does everyone. She's every mother, and he was every mother's son.
That song for Cindy Sheehan from my record from 2006, Halliburton Boardroom Massacre, with the very capable Sean Staples playing all sorts of stuff in there, and other great players. Dave, what was his name? Gosh, I'm spacing on it now. It's been a while. So that's April 4th, incidentally, in case I didn't mention that connection between the date. That's April 4th, 2003, right? 2003? When Casey Sheehan was killed in action, or in not action, but an IED. Is that action? I guess it's a lot of action. Here's on April 9th, let's see, April 9th, what year? 2003, just after the most recent chapter of the ongoing invasions of Iraq, 2003, the journal, after the U.S. Army bombed, or shelled with a tank the Palestine Hotel, killing a whole bunch of journalists, including a couple of Spanish journalists, Jose Couso and his cameraman, I think who was Ukrainian, I don't know, a whole bunch of different journalists were killed in the Palestine Hotel by the U.S., even though the U.S. knew very well that it was a hotel that all the journalists were staying in. And of course, Al Jazeera also informed the U.S. of their coordinates in order to not get bombed, and as a result of informing the U.S. of their coordinates, did get bombed, and a bunch of Al Jazeera journalists were killed in, I think, how many different countries were they bombed by the U.S. in? I guess it was in Iraq and Afghanistan, I think, and then the U.S. bombed journalists in Serbia as well before that. I can't remember from which countries they were, but anyway, after the U.S. killed the journalists in the Palestine Hotel, and at that time, Aznar was the Prime Minister of Spain, and he was in the coalition of the willing with Bush, and he had Spanish troops in Iraq, and the journalists of Spain went on strike and refused to cover Aznar's speech. They were there when Aznar started speaking, and then they put down their notebooks, put down their cameras, put down their microphones, and turned their backs and walked out. And I thought that was wonderful, and I wrote this song.
Battle had been raging for how long it's hard to say. We were there to tell the story of the slaughter come what may. We didn't hide behind the lines, we reported on the crimes for BBC, Telemundo, and the Sunday Times. They said we were in danger, bearing witness to the war. A half dozen had just been killed in the days before. Then came the day they bombed Jazeera and Abu Dhabi TV as well. At the same time they took aim and shelled the Palestine Hotel. 4 journalists were murdered in a single day. And then our own Prime Minister, Aznar, was to say, there will be no investigation. Such a thing would not make sense. It was just a tragic accident. So at his next press conference, Aznar approached the podium to give a national address. Gathered all around him, the men and women of the press. He opened his mouth, we put our cameras on the floor, dropped our notebooks, turned our backs, and walked right out the door. We marched down the street and left our cameras where they lay. 'Cause all the news that's fit to mention is there is no news today. We were not embedded in your networked play-by-play. We were just reporters, reporting day by day. We were trying to do our jobs, bring the Baghdad street, whether it was victory, massacre, or defeat. And those 3 missiles told a story that's not hard to surmise. The army has decided what's good for the global public's eyes. These missiles weren't coincidence, of this there is no doubt. And on that April afternoon, assassinos we did shout. We marched down the street, left our cameras where they lay. 'Cause all the news that's fit to mention is there is no news today. What happens to the message when the messenger is shelled? What happens to a nation that says it's just as well? What happens when the embeds are the last ones left alive? Is this your brave new world in which our liberty shall thrive? We marched down the street, left our cameras where they lay. 'Cause all the news that's fit to mention is there is no news today.
Spanish journalists strike, and that includes some of the same folks who worked with me in Boston on Halliburton Boardroom Massacre are playing with me on that one, and Reiko just reminded me that the name of one of those musicians that I was spacing on is Dave Westner, wonderful musician from the Boston area, along with Sean Staples and Eric Royer. So on April 10th, which is my birthday, my 46th birthday, April 10th in 2006, that was the first protest that my daughter ever went to. My daughter Layla, who was born on January 28th, 2006. Me and her mom went to that protest in Houston. It was amazing. It was the time, that month, April and May 2006 was a phenomenal month in the U.S. and in the world. It was some of the biggest protests ever in many, many different cities in the U.S. This like so much beyond the scale of what had gone on before. It's really, and then people on the left sometimes forget it even happened. Frequently when you hear people mentioning those protests in 2006, or mentioning like the history of protest in recent decades, they'll just forget about that, somehow. But which is weird. But the biggest protests in many cities ever to happen in this country happened during that month in April, May 2006. and people walked off the job and in large numbers. And this was all around. You could say it was around the issue of immigrant rights and about the criminalization of immigrants, which was something the Bush administration was working hard on, along with the Obama administration. But it was more than that. It was a self-aware movement of people fighting for equality and for the rights of workers from anywhere, and making all kinds of eloquent points about who they are and where they belong, which is right where they are. There's a wonderful saying on a bumper sticker that I saw in Texas one time. It said, "We didn't cross the border crossed us," and that's exactly what happened. And I had the great privilege of singing at the protest in Houston, where I more or less lived at the time, in 2006. There were estimated 50,000 people there, overwhelmingly of Mexican origin, and I sang St. Patrick Battalion and a couple other songs. I can't remember what I did, but it was a wonderful experience. And here's a song I wrote a few years ago about a man trying to cross the U.S.-Mexico border.
I was raised in Guanajuato, that's where I was born. For 1,000 years, that's where my family grew the corn. Farming's what we lived by, and farming's what we knew. Then the gobierno signed NAFTA, and our farming days were through. I had to leave the village, there was no other way. I had to find work somewhere or starve if I should stay. In Ciudad de Mexico, I tried to survive, but the colonias were full, there was no work to stay alive. I went to Tijuana, the maquila factories, people living by the sewage, dying on their knees. It was then in desperation I knew I had to go, leave the country I was born in, the only one I know. Across the unknown deserts to the other side, around the wall that stretches on 100 miles wide. I trudged on for days, I don't know how far I got, but I never knew in all my life the sun could be so hot. My feet had turned to blisters, my water bag run dry. I thought about me madrecita as I looked up at the sky. I lay down for the last time, parched upon the ground. Maybe someday my body will be found, eaten by the vultures, bones bleached in the sun. Maybe I'll go to heaven if there is one. And I guess someone in California who wants to make their fields green, gonna have to find another Mexican to keep their dishes clean.
So, well, while that song was going on, I got $15 from donation from Jack. Thank you so much, Jack. And it's embarrassing how often you do that, but I appreciate it every time. And I recently have been really tired of social media, and I especially started feeling really distracted by the way, like, I guess I just had my phone set up to the default settings or whatever when you get Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. And so it was like every few seconds, or sometimes more often, the phone is like lighting up with some invitation to some event thousands of miles away that I'll never possibly get to. And of course also, comments on my posts and retweets of messages and whatever, it would just all come up in this stream. And, of course I would sort of pay attention sometimes and not other times, but it's just really distracting and really hard to stay focused on whatever I'm doing when the phone lights up with some message. So I got rid of all those settings so that Facebook and Twitter and all that doesn't make my phone light up. I just did that yesterday, but I kept the PayPal. I kept the PayPal thing, so that when I get a donation or a subscription on PayPal, then that lights up. So text messages and PayPal and phone calls. That's the only things that makes the phone light up. But it's just so nice when donations come in. So I thought I'd keep that setting on because it's always so heartwarming every time. And the most recent subscription, incidentally, was this morning at like 7 in the morning. And so now I think I'm up to 93 subscribers, getting pretty close to the triple digits. And it's very exciting because I won't go into why, because it's just because I've already talked about that in the last show, and that's enough. So back to history and song. Recent history, we're talking about the past 10, 15 years mostly, but it's history and it's important, and it is instructive in so many ways. And April 11th, 2002, I'll bet there are people out there who know exactly what happened on April 11th, 2002, but that's when the right-wing Venezuelan opposition launched a coup attempt against Hugo Chavez and his democratically elected and extremely popular socialist government in Venezuela. And the coup was defeated after 3 days due to the opposition to the coup plotters on the part of millions and millions of Venezuelans who risked their lives and liberty to flood the streets and prevent the military from moving. And there's a wonderful documentary about that called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" by this Irish documentary crew that happened to be covering events in Caracas and in the presidential palace with Hugo Chavez right when the coup happened. And for some bizarre reason, the coup plotters let them stay in the place and continue doing their documentary, which was amazing that they let them do that. I don't know how that happened, but it turned out great. And I wrote this song.
For the moment, the horizon is on fire, democracy rising, balanced on a wire, liberation. You can smell it in the air, things are moving, and the rich are all aware. Some will talk along the sidelines, others they will do. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, the airwaves are live on the radio. The barrios have arrived, Cuban doctors in their thousands on the street in the shanty towns. they're pouring the concrete. The opposition whines that Venezuela is all through. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, folks are learning how to read the Constitution. Is the People's Creed from their back pocket. They'll take it out for all to see, and their motto is death or liberty. There are those who will complain, mostly the privileged few. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, the oil wells are flowing and Citgo's profits know exactly where they're going. Feed the hungry, house those without a home, give the tractors to those who dig sod and loam. Maybe he will meet the fate that Allende knew, but I'll sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, the movement's on the rise, it's all happening right before our eyes. But turn on the TV and there's nothing they will say. If he's gone and we don't hear it, did it happen anyway? If the future's to be ours, I ask, what are you gonna do? Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup.
Well, I think I have to say that while that song was playing, then Daniel Brown subscribed to me, and I have to say thank you so much for that, Daniel. And now I'm in the kind of somewhat bizarre position of all three people in the chat room are people who have recently donated to my campaign. So I feel humbled, I think. Or maybe I'm just egotistical and pretending to feel humbled. But in any case, it's some form of humility, I think. Or, I mean, it really see, I'm coughing. I think I need to drink some water. I'm going to play a song here. How about that? Rather than croak away at you all, and talk about silly things. I'll play a song that's related to not exactly history so much as a history that happens every year on April 15th. And for those of you who are in the USA, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's tax day. That's the deadline for filing your taxes. And it is a horrible, horrible day, and a day of shame and horror. And we should all stop doing it.
500 or so rich men in the Congress are engaged in some most serious debate, along with a few thousand lobbyists. They will now decide the world's fate. They say we're running out of dough, and the people all must take another hit. Well, there are some things that I know, and what they're saying is, I'm not a mathematician, but one doesn't have to be too deft to see if 1% of us owns half the wealth. That leaves 99% to share what's left. And then if 60 cents on each tax dollar is buying bombs to blow the planet into bits, then I think we need to grab them by the collar and patiently explain to them that that's tax the rich, tax the rich. Close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, bring 'em home, and eliminate the military budget. They say we cannot pay for health care, nor for decent schools to educate the kids. Sorry if you don't have shoes to wear, but this recession has just left us in the skids. They say we can't afford those windmills after all, so just stiffen up and show a little grit. And if climate change and poverty have gotten you down, just sing, oh say, can you see? Tax the rich, tax the rich, close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, bring 'em home, and eliminate the military budget. They say we've gotta fight those terrorists. They say we've got to send our kids to war. Just ignore that corporation behind the flag and don't ask us what the hell they're fighting for. I hear GE is subsidized, leaving us fools to pay for it. They shirk their duties while we downsize. I know what that's called. Tax the rich, tax the rich, close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, bring 'em home, and eliminate the military budget. Tax the rich, tax the rich, close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, bring 'em home, and eliminate the military budget.
Moving on to April 19th. April 19th is a date of infamy in many different countries, I'm sure. It's Ali Rosenblatt's birthday, who sang on several of my albums. And I remember that. I always remember that because it's easy to remember birthdays when they're associated with dates that you can remember. Like Reiko's birthday is July 26th, and I can easily remember that because it's Cuban Revolution Day. April 19th is not only Ali Rosenblatt's birthday, but it's also the first shot fired in the American Revolution and the beginning of the most impressive urban uprising in the history of the world. Hands down, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 1943.
First they occupied our country, then they spread their vicious lies. Evil propaganda filled our ranks with double-dealing spies. They cordoned off a reservation, built a wall all around it, drove us all into this ghetto, and our city'd never be as the Nazis found. First no one believed it, just what horrors lay in store. The sound of boots upon the staircase, of leather gloves upon the door. Some of us they sent to labor, to slave for them to the last breath. Most of us they sent to Auschwitz, 500,000 people sent to a pointless early death. There were those of us who worked with them, a desperate effort to survive. Even when our numbers were so few, maybe 60,000 left alive. People said we had no chances. By then we all knew they were right. It was 1943, and we, the walking dead, made up our minds to fight. I remember Warsaw. We stood side by side. The Star of David flew above the ghetto. There we lived and there we died. We cleansed the ghetto of their agents, dug a maze of tunnels underground. We begged the Allies give us weapons, but empty words was all we found. So we saved each precious bottle, made bombs of rags and gasoline, and in this script of mindless carnage, we waited in the shadows for the final scene. It was the month of April. The SS came marching in, singing songs to praise der Führer and all his Aryan kin. To see the shock upon their faces, we'd show the world on this day. We'd not go like sheep off to the slaughter. With the last blood running through our hearts, we'd make the devils pay. I remember Warsaw. We stood side by side. The Star of David flew above the ghetto. There we lived and there we died. We had taken our positions, each escape route planned. We rained down Molotovs upon them, with each retreat another stand. Yes, we killed the Nazi bastards. They lay dying by the score. We made each scarce bullet count, and as the demons ran, we killed some more. For 1 full month the battle raged, and the word spread all around that it wasn't over till every building had been leveled to the ground. I am the ghost of the apocalypse, and these few words I have to tell. Let it never be forgotten that for 4 long weeks we fought, we stood up before we fell. I remember Warsaw. We stood side by side. The Star of David flew above the ghetto. There we lived and there we died.
And then on April 20th, 2010, so recently, was the beginning of a long, drawn-out environmental disaster. And the human victims of which, many of them were descendants of the folks who fled Canada in a couple hundred years ago, headed to Louisiana.
We came to Canada a long time ago, but the Brits showed no mercy. We had to go. Our cities fell and we set sail from the shores of La Nouvelle France out into the gale. In Louisiana we started again, fished and farmed, made a life here and then. We celebrated a new day, and we sang Laissez les bon temps brûler. Laissez les bon temps brûler. All we wanted was to be left alone on a patch of paradise that we could call our own. Fish the Gulf, dance and pray, but when the revolution came, we went and joined the fray. And when we came back from the awful fight, the Battle of Baton Rouge gave us nightmares at night. But we got the fiddles out to play, and we sang Laissez les bon temps brûler. laissez les bon temps brûler. We fished the seas, and when we came back, it was time for fée dodo and all the crawfish you could pack. La grande dérangement to memory that had long ago been traded for joie de vivre. The great upheaval far in the past, now we'd found a new world we all hoped would last. Cajun music there by the bay, laissez les bon temps brûler. Laissez les bon temps brûler. When the oil companies began to drill, we did our best to get along. We kept fishing still. It was hard, but we persevered. Brought our catch to market like we've done for 200 years. Some went to Texas to work the oil, but most of us stayed here on this Cajun soil. We'd work the Gulf, come home and say, laissez les bon temps brûler. Laissez les bon temps brûler. We survived Katrina and so much more, but when the oil started gushing out on the ocean floor, I guess it's time to say goodbye. There's no life here for a fisherman when all the fish do is die. Maybe California is where I'll land. I've heard there's still fish there beyond the golden sand. But I can only cry to hear some fool say, laissez les bon temps brûler. Laissez les bon temps brûler. Laissez les bon temps brûler.
So, welcome to Tatiana to the chat room. Now there's 4 people out there in the chat room, and maybe others beyond. So on April 25th in 1846, the United States Army invaded Mexico and annexed most of Mexico. And there were a lot of atrocities committed along the way as they annexed Mexico, and partly as a result of witnessing some of these atrocities committed by the U.S. Army. There were thousands of people who deserted from the Army, and but there were 202, I believe, who deserted from the U.S. Army and then joined the Mexican Army, forming the Mexican Army's Foreign Legion with their green flags, and they were the St. Patrick Battalion, the San Patricios.
My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We got about at least a quarter of a battalion right here, so you can sing along with it. We marched beneath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin gold brow, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad para Republica. Just 50 years after Wolf Tone, 5,000 miles away, The Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. What'd we do? We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, where their volunteers were raping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. Major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
Well, thank you so much, Tatiana Ingold, for subscribing during that last song. Very, very much appreciated. And that was Ali Rosenblatt singing with me, and Eric Royer playing the banjo. And what, I'm speechless. I just don't know what to say with all these people sending me money. I mean, if it's exactly what I'm looking for, you know. But when it happens, it's just a little overwhelming. So I'll just play another song here, and of course, if there's anything in particular anybody thinks I should ramble on about, I'm happy to take suggestions. But it seems, it's strange that I'm the one doing all the talking. I mean, there's something wrong. I gotta figure out how to patch people in and stuff here. But there's a way to do it. But it looked like you had to be able to code. You had to know how to code better than I do to do it, but I could figure it out eventually, I'm sure. So anyway, moving on. April in history. April 26th, 1937 was the terrible day that the Nazis decided to see what their new planes and new bombs would do on a civilian population when dropped upon them. And they bombed the Basque city of Guernica, and that was that preceded just by a few months the beginning of the forming of the international brigades I'm just seeing that Jack is saying that the nice thing about the month in history shows is he doesn't have to listen to the love songs, and I think he's one of at least a couple of people I know. I believe Guy Smallman in London was another who said he just fast-forwarded through the love songs or made CD compilations that omitted the love song. But nice. So yeah, so this is a song I wrote about that pertains to this anniversary of the bombing of Guernica. It's a song about all the folks who went to try to prevent more such bombings from happening in Spain, and to try to defend the Spanish Republic against the fascists. And of course, they were ultimately unsuccessful, due largely to blockade of weapons that imposed by Britain, the U.S., and France.
They were old when I was young. Now they've all but passed away. Now it's just a second-hand memory of the day when from all around the world they sailed off to Spain to fight against the fascists, where so many men were slain. Who will recall the days when they all stood side by side, now that the last Lincoln veteran died? Beside Martin Luther King, or in a veterans parade, you could see the men who made the journey to join the 15th Brigade. When men of many nations, of most every creed and hue, Catholics and Protestants, atheists and Jews, joined together in the trenches to turn back the fascist tide, now that the last Lincoln veteran died. The working class of many nations joined in a desperate bid with what weapons they could find. They fought to save Madrid from Brussels and Berlin, Galway and London town. Who will recall the brigadistas who went to take the fascists down? There beside the Spanish people, even the figs and olives cry, now that the last Lincoln veteran had the tanks, but Il Duce and Fier deserve only some of Franco's thanks, 'cause the fuel to move the armor came from the USA, and the men that they gunned down were from New York and Frisco Bay. Uncle Sam claimed he was neutral. Who will remember how he lied, now that the last Lincoln veteran died? They say people get conservative the older that they age. They say that being radical is just a useful phase, but the finest communist I've known lived to 95, and he spent spent his whole life striving for humanity to thrive. To forget these fallen heroes is something I cannot abide. Now that the last Lincoln veteran died. Now that the last Lincoln veteran died. There's a valley in Spain called Jarama. It's a place that we all know so well. It was there that we gave of our manhood, where so many of our brave comrades fell.
And then let's see, that's April 28th, 2004 was when the Abu Ghraib prison torture scandal hit the papers, and I'll do a song about that. And I'm just reading Tatiana saying that she grew up with environmental activist parents and making blankets with texts for demonstrations. And yeah, my daughter is having a childhood a bit like that, and so I just asked her if that was a good childhood. And yeah, there's pros and cons, I suppose. I remember my daughter's grandma being really, really pissed off that we had taken her to that protest in Houston, when she was like 3 months old. I think she was fine, though, I mean, what's the problem? They have an immune system after 2 weeks or so I think the first 2 weeks maybe you shouldn't take them to protest. But, after they're 2 weeks old, I think they'll be okay, as long as it's a nice, peaceful protest, I mean, you get older and you can tell when the cops are going to attack everybody, but that would really suck for a kid, I'm sure. So far so good as far as Layla's concerned. No police attacks on her yet, and we hope to maintain that flawless record of not being clubbed. Here's After We Torture Our Prisoners.
We'll get rid of the dictator, rebuild your country, make sure all your kids go to school. We'll clean up the cities, get the sewage plants running, institute parliamentary rule. We'll bring you autonomy, senators and judges, and a shiny new blue banner. We'll bring you pride and prosperity, food in your bellies, in every home a phone, fax, and scanner. After we torture our prisoners, we'll bring you decades of peace, spiritual release, free religious expression. You can say what you want in the papers you run, we'll never force a confession. After we torture our prisoners, the oil will flow just where it should go, across the desert and into the sea. You'll thank your God and the CIA that finally you are free. After we torture our prisoners, you'll all be safe with us to protect you and keep you out of harm's way. You'll thank creation and your liberation from the dark into a new day. After we torture our prisoners, you can all jump for joy, each girl and boy, and look boldly into the distance. You'll be so happy for all that we've done, for such invaluable assistance. After we torture our prisoners, you won't have to worry about tyrants and bullies now that you have sovereignty. You can hold your head high, kiss Saddam goodbye, say hello to democracy. After we torture our prisoners, after we torture our prisoners.
So we are now reaching the end of April and the end of this broadcast, and I appreciate all you people out there listening now or later, and I'll close with April 29th, 2003, which was a day of infamy in the city of Fallujah, the city of mosques, in this city which was a beautiful city at that time. And it was that was the day that U.S. troops gunned down 13 unarmed demonstrators, killed them, and was one of the events that led to the uprising in Fallujah, which then led to the complete destruction of the city. And I'll close with Fallujah, and this is when you hear, I believe this is the version that has Professor D doing a fantastic rap in there, and I think it's one of his best, but one of many. He's a fantastic hip-hop artist from Toronto, and might be currently living in Chicago, I can't remember. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the first Sunday of May for those who want to tune in to the next show. And for anybody listening in Europe, I might have mentioned this before, but I'm going there next week on Monday, leaving for a 10-week tour of Europe, and I'm going to miss my little girl, and I'm full of anxiety about it, but I think I'll probably have a good time for the most part, and I'm looking forward to seeing all you Europeans, at least in the places I'm going to, which is 6 countries in the north and west of the region known as Europe. And yeah, so there you go. Here's Fallujah.
Maybe you'll hear about me when you watch the evening news. So I write this letter for you, my friends, the truth then you may choose. I had a good time at Oxford, and the world I did roam. When my studies were finished, then I went back home. All I wanted were good things, land and liberty, and all the sorts of things we learned at the university. I'm not a fan of dictatorships. I'd rather say live and let live. But for those who threaten my family, there's nothing I won't give. I will fight for my country. I'll defend this land. I'll stare at the whites of your soldiers' eyes with this Kalashnikov in my hand. With this Kalashnikov in my hand. When you break down the doors of my neighbors, when you say that might makes right, when you say you're looking for terrorists in their bedrooms late at night, when you torture my brother at gunpoint, on his head a canvas sack, all I can say to you, soldier, is you'd best watch your back. I will fight for my country. I'll defend this land. I'll stare at the whites of your soldiers' eyes with this Kalashnikov in my hand. With this Kalashnikov in my hand.
Yeah. See, I'ma fight for my country, though I hate the war, but I deplore even more when they take me for. Think about where you live, how you typically be when the bombs start falling in the middle of the street. It ain't difficult to see what side to choose. With all the lies they use, can't hide the truth. White lies from these white guys in the White House. Might as well wear white sheets while they wipe out. I mean, white out all opposition. And bomb kill the people into submission. He's got a Bible, he's down with Jesus Christ. He likes blacks, just ask for the leaves of rights. It's all evil lies in a weak disguise. See the signs, read in between the lines. You wanna save America, I'll bring you support. Arrest the president and bring him to court. Charge him and his puppeters of war crimes. And start paying reparations of all kinds. You think what I'm telling you to do is extreme, but if you live in Fallujah, it'd be a beautiful dream. So I hold my tears and my hopes and fears when you bomb our country and attack our town. Don't be surprised when the whole world cheers to see another Black Hawk down, motherfucker.
When you come with your tanks on our city streets and you say these streets are yours, when you say you'll rebuild us with bombers and oil tankers on our shores, when you've gunned down my child in Fallujah, you needn't wonder why. I look at you through the blades of your copter and say it's a good day to die. I will fight for my country. I'll defend this land. I'll stare at the whites of your soldiers' eyes with this Kalashnikov in my hand. With this Kalashnikov in my